As you know, Trump hasn't even been sworn in yet, but already some possible conflicts of real interest have popped up, and Trump is as defiant as ever, saying he is not going to change. From his penthouse apartment over the last 2 weeks, Trump has repeatedly used his new position to meet or talk with people who could help push his business interests overseas, some proudly posting pictures online. And now he tells the New York Times, the law is on my side. The president can't have a conflict of interest.
I think that we're only at the beginning, on the cusp of potential controversy involving conflicts of interest.
During the campaign, Trump and his surrogates denounced an investigation into his Trump Charitable Foundation as political.
Are you confident that the Trump Foundation has followed all charitable rules and laws?
Well, I hope so. I mean, my lawyers do it.
But in a new filing, the Trump Foundation now admits it was guilty of self-dealing. Following reports by the Washington Post that Trump used the charity to pay for a portrait of himself, to help settle lawsuits, even to buy a signed football helmet. And the new filing also reveals that the Trump Foundation last year, just like the Clinton Foundation, accepted a huge donation, a $150,000 check in Trump's case, from a Ukrainian billionaire, Viktor Pinchuk. The kind of donation that led to allegations by Trump that the Clintons and their foundation were corrupt.
Clinton donors got favorable treatment.
There needs to be a ban on contributions to the Trump Foundation, and I think the children in particular should not be giving paid speaking fees, particularly overseas, because again, that is a common method that foreign oligarchs will use to curry favor with political figures in the United States.
For more on this, let's bring in our guest. Drew Harwell is a national business reporter at the Washington Post. Drew, thanks for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Well, there's a lot to chew over here, but how about from the perspective of Donald Trump himself, where he says, in no uncertain terms, that the president's exempt from conflicts of interest, period, exclamation point. It's not as simple as that, is it?
No, it's not. It's a little bit right, it's a little bit wrong. There are no laws forcing Trump to put his assets into a blind trust. There's no conflict of interest, provisions like those that hold every other elected official and public official in Congress and across the government to those sort of conflict of interest standards. But conflict of interest is a concept. It's an issue. It's not just a law. And these are things that are going to be, circling him for a long time. These are things that will be having people question his judgment, even if it's not, something that's outright illegal. And
let me bring up a few examples that people have already mentioned and give me an idea how much concern this is having on Capitol Hill. Let's say a foreign visitor comes in that potentially has business before the U.S. government. They decide they're going to stay at the new Trump Hotel in Washington. 5-night stay, 20 grand a night, and one of the suites there's 100 grand and a clear message. Apparently this is already being thought and discussed here to obviously have more of a favorable reception within the Trump administration. One would think that's trying to buy access, or at least the appearance thereof.
It could potentially be, something that is a violation of something in the Constitution called the Emoluments Clause, which means like a payment from a foreign government to, an elected official in the U.S. It's something that goes back to the 1700s. And it was, about worries of gifts steering politicians in America toward a decision that may not be in the public interest. So is it a gift if a foreign diplomat goes to the Trump Hotel and pays that much for a room? Or what if they pay more than the market rate? Is that money on top a gift? These are things that the government hasn't really had to deal with. They're things that could potentially, hamper Trump, the company, in court, or hamper Trump as a president in the Oval Office.
And Drew, it's also complicated because he seems more than eager to push the envelope. I mean, just think about the visit that he had with business interests that he had, and partners, I should say, in India. They posed for a photo where clearly you could say he's mixing and matching his role as a member, obviously, of the White House, the head of the White House, and at the same time, somebody who's got business interests with these folks. He's trying to find out where the line is, and he's doing it in Technicolor.
Yeah, and he's recognizing that it is a conflict of interest. He's even called it a conflict of interest yesterday when he had a meeting with the New York Times. But he doesn't seem to be bothered by the implications of it in the way that other people who look at these things from both sides of the aisle, even former chief White House ethics lawyers under George Bush have said, these are sorts of things that can really influence a president and can add some doubt into the process of whether those decisions are made in the right way. And he's just sort of saying, I'm going to do what I can with my business that I think will be right for my business. I'm going to leave it to my kids to manage, and I'm not going to care about it. Just trust me while I'm in office. So the real question is whether, voters, Congress members, the people who work with him in Washington are going to take him at his word.
Except he also then goes as far as to say, hey, I can do both. I can walk and chew gum. I can run my company and run the country at the same time. No problem. Nothing to see here. It's also complicated, Drew, because clearly he said, hey, my kids aren't going to be part of my administration. They're going to run the business. We're not putting this in some blind trust. They'll take it over. At the same time, he's got his daughter sitting in as he meets with the Japanese premier, and his son-in-law, he seems not only to have had a huge role, certainly in the campaign, but he arguably is going to want to even give him the highest security clearances at all. I know Jack and Bobby did it when Kennedy was president, his brother was attorney general, but this is different, isn't it?
It is different, and even back then with the Kennedys, it was an issue. It's even more of an issue now because Trump is saying that his kids can play both sides, that they can be on his transition team and his executive committee, helping him choose these really important political appointees, while also running the business, making decisions for hotels and Trump business interests, and lots of different countries where the U.S. has really sensitive diplomatic ties and where those businesses can really create an issue there. So he's recognizing that this is an issue, but he's not really taking the steps of putting that separation there where there's an arm's length transaction and there's no worry about one side entangling the other.
For me, at least, Drew, and I'm serious, I don't think I'm the guy wearing the tinfoil hat here. The biggest concern for me is because we never saw the tax returns, but it's widely believed that there's tens, if not even hundreds of millions of dollars of debt being held in foreign banks, including widely discussed possibly Russia or China. We don't know what ulterior motives or interests there may be, let alone business interests that he'll have abroad. And we don't know when formulating foreign policy how much of that is in the self-interest of himself rather than what's in the best policy of America. We're flying blind here as a country in a way that I don't remember us having this kind of, where we have to openly question, why is he doing this? Why is he defending Putin? Why is he saying X, Y, or Z? And we still don't know this and probably won't know this certainly come January 20th or even throughout the balance of his term.
Yeah, we don't know. This is the value of transparency right here. This is the value of having things like tax returns, having things like vetted fundamental financial records of somebody like Trump. So then we can say, if we know, then we're not afraid of some weird relationship out there tilting our president-elect. And if Trump is not going to meet the American people halfway, then this is going to be something that's going to be haunting him, haunting every decision, because how can people trust that he's being independent, making these choices with the good of the American people in his mind when there's just so many questions out there.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. I could go on for a half an hour with this, but Drew, I certainly appreciate the time, and have a good Thanksgiving for yourself.
Thank you, you too.
All right, we're going to hear from the attorneys on this. They'll join us to take a look at the legal ramifications of what's going on.